able to hear me and hear our group. And if we are being too quiet, just yell at us, throw something at us, whatever you want to do. Before we're going to talk a little bit about project delivery, and we want to spice it up a little bit tonight. Maybe do something a little bit different. We've done a lot of these types of presentations, and I think a lot of the folks here in the room have had various experiences in their own, both good and bad. And, just a real quick poll. We've got just a raise of hands. Contractors in the room. Got some contractors in the room. Okay. Architects, spec writers. Okay. And vendors, industry vendors. Okay. Okay. Any students in the room? We got life students. Everybody raise their hand. There's no students in the room. Well, I guess. So, I thought about tonight, and we've done a lot of PowerPoint presentations to a lot of these, I'm sure. And before we get started, I'd like to just throw out a question to you, and maybe get a little bit of engagement from you even now of, in our industry, it's a very interesting industry that we're in. We take things that are ideas and concepts from the imagination into paper, using these tools that we have today with data and technology to create these wonderful edifices for people and for that whole human experience, for hospitals and schools and all kinds of different things. Some projects go well, some projects don't go well. So I guess the question to you, and I'd love to get a few of you to give me some feedback, just to kind of set the tone for the evening, is what is it that, why do projects fail? What is it, in your own experience, or through looking at other projects, what is it about projects that cause them to fail? So with that, I'm going to throw it back to you, and I'd love to hear, kind of getting you started here, getting you engaged after you've had your couple of beers. What is it that causes projects to fail? Go ahead.
Inaccurate communication.
Inaccurate communication. That's excellent. Dang, gold star. Unrealistic schedule.
Unrealistic budgets.
Unrealistic budgets. That's never happened. Who set the budget anyway, right? It was the C-level folks that had really no idea what it was actually going to cost to develop and build a program of that nature. We've all been there. And some of us are probably there right now.
People not following the specification, actually, value engineering it late in the project, not what the original intent was.
So that's really good. So specifications, this is CSI, so understanding what's in the documents, and then it's the delivering on what the design intent was and what the specifications call for. And that can cause major problems, because let's say the contractor goes in a different direction, or there's value engineering to save money, but there was a bigger picture there that got missed, and it ended up costing the owner more money in the long run because of operational and maintenance issues. Good one. Any others?
Clarity of who's the designer, who's the builder.
Relying on false assumptions.
False assumptions, okay. Can you unpack that a little bit for me, maybe?
Looking at existing buildings where I get involved, is people make assumptions about a lot of aspects of the project without really researching it. And there's sometimes the question that you even ask, it's so evident to everyone that this is going to be this way, and it doesn't turn out to be. They don't challenge assumptions.
Not having early integration. So what do you mean by that?
As in contractors and designers and all collaborating early in the design phase.
Okay. Getting everybody together, but
On the
it's
same page.
getting everybody on the same page, right?
That would be
there's a lot of really good feedback here. So what we want to do tonight, are there any others? I don't want to miss any. There's just if your chest is just pounding and there's something you want to share, please, don't hold back. Okay. All right. So the surety company's #1 pick for why projects fail was, this is on a national level, but ENR, and you'll probably find the data to support it, was related to a lot of these things, but it was the failure to communicate, and it was communications. It's the #1 reason why projects failed was communications, misunderstanding, lack of trust, all of those things that relate to communications. Go figure, we're human beings, right? How do we get things done? Well, we have to talk to each other. We have to relate, we have to integrate, right? We have to understand what was the CSI spec writer's intent when he wrote that into the specification, rather than just as the contractor, having been one myself, having tried to read and understand what spec writers write sometimes, it can be very difficult and challenging. So communications, and that early integration. So we're going to talk about that tonight. I want to introduce my team. I'm Mike Day, CPM, and we're a Northwest regional construction management owner representative firm that basically we're an advocate for owners. We work for owners, and those are primarily our clients. And big believers in integration, communication, and collaboration, and have really built the culture of our company around that. My background is Northwest guy for my whole life. I was born in Seattle, and actually 5th generation Washingtonian and 4th generation Oregon. So I've got roots that go back several generations here, and this is definitely home. And love the Northwest brand, love the climate that we have. And I've been in construction all my life. I've been doing it for since I was 16. Started pounding nails and working on high rises when I was 18. Was a union card carrying carpenter and labor through college, and worked through the trades, and so really developed that appreciation for the nuts and bolts of how to put buildings together and the whole building process. And in the last 16 years of my career, even though I'm only about 35 now. But in the last 15 years, in 2000, I really felt this tug to move into this role that we're currently playing, and that's really being that interface to be a catalyst to help owners to kind of develop the whole project, and to bring architects and contractors and spec writers, vendors all together for successful projects and to really deliver projects well. So that's a little bit about me, and I want to pass it over to you guys real quick, Summer, and then just on down the line, and then we'll get into our presentation. Feel free to stop us at any point in time to do the presentation. I know we've got about an hour, so we want to respect people's schedules tonight.
Summer Gorder. My company is EcoReal Solutions, and my background is architecture. I don't always open with that, but I saw enough hands where I can balance that. I worked for an architecture firm that went under in the end of 2008, so I worked hands-on with contractors, built a lot of tools for streamlining sustainability, making it more cost-effective based on the CSI master format guidelines, and just trying to speak the language between owners, architects, contractors, subs, and vendors. How do you start to weave this all together? So this subject is near and dear to my heart, and I'm really happy to be here. And I've heard the full spectrum of kind of complaints and feedback and everything from all ends of the industry. So I love doing this, and I love the feedback. So happy to interact with you guys at any point.
Yeah, my name is Doug Garland. Obviously the loudmouth here. You guys haven't figured that out yet. I'm a project manager for DCPM. I've been fortunate enough in my career to be on several very large projects that were very collaborative and worked out really well. So like Summer, I really believe in this methodology. It's something that I can definitely get behind.
I'm Glenn Schneid. I'm a project manager, like Doug, with DCPM Services. My background is architecture. I'm a licensed architect. But I just really enjoy being in that go-between space between the owner and the architect, engineering group, and the general contractor. And I like being in that part of the project that sees me through the entire project. Last 3.5, 4 years, I've been fortunate enough to work on a big variety of projects, but I seem to be gravitating toward integrating the owner's staff into the commissioning process and the construction process, and then carried on through that transition and closeout and turnover warranty period and that follow-up, kind of a closer for the owner and the owner's staff. I'll be talking a little bit about that too.
My firm is BIM Connection. We provide building information modeling and virtual design and construction services. I'm originally a mechanical engineer. Big time timber fan for you soccer fans out there. Yeah! Whoever made that good goal. I'm proud to be part of our teams. One team exclusively does BIM. One of my teammates, Aaron, is with me. He's a former journeyman electrician. Does some of our BIM modeling for the trades. That's where we focus in pre-con. And looking forward to our meeting tonight.
Great, let's jump in and see if that vote works.
Engineer.
She figures it out.
He's our tech guy too. He's a nerd. Gonna have one of those. So we're gonna just kind of scratch the surface a little bit. I know different people have different backgrounds and experiences here. When it comes to this kind of integrated project delivery, this where we're moving in the industry, and it's kind of what we want to talk about tonight. Is we'll talk a little bit about where we come from, traditional contracting models, but where are we going and what's the future look like, whether it's BIM and VDC, whether it is technology tools that integrate with that, and then talking a little bit more about what happens on the back end, how that affects owners, and something that often gets overlooked, or where there are those silos that exist within organizations between design and construction and the capital development and the facilities folks that have to maintain and operate the facilities. So with that, this is a great slide that just reminds me of kind of where our industry has been for many, many years, and it's the breaking down those silos and removing those walls and the barriers between the owner and architect and the contractor. And that's really what we're here to talk about tonight with you, to have that dialogue and want to have that engaging conversation to see what's working for you too. So this is really that traditional kind of talking about the level of common understanding. It relates back to the CSI spec writer and what he was envisioning in terms of the specifications, and that disconnect that happens when you hire your architect here, later you hire your engineers and your contractor, and then much later your trade partners come on board, and not having that common understanding, not having that integration can lead to communication pitfalls where there are those disconnects between what was the design intent, what was it really that the architect had caught from the owner's vision for the project, and how does that relate to the contractor's budget, the reality of what can we actually afford to build, and moving away from maybe the design, bid, build environment into this much more collaborative environment where everybody's joined together and getting that early alignment of the goals and values of the project. I love this slide here because it really talks about this. We design, and then we have these traditional estimates for the traditional pre-con services, even with CMGC, where you hire your CMGC, but it's really on a very short leash, and all they're doing is providing some cost validation, or maybe you have a third-party estimator that's doing that, and you don't even have the contractor on board. And it's that putting in and taking out, very inefficient process, and we have the tools and technology today to really move in a new direction. So that's kind of where we want to go tonight, and hopefully you won't tweet the Vulture Engineering names. So we call it Vulture Engineering, but True Value Engineering I'm going to take a quick pause. What is true value engineering? What does that mean to three of you? Not just, I want three responses real quick. What does true value engineering mean to you? How about you, Randy? As an owner, what does true value engineering mean to you as the receiver of the end product?
I want the team to be able to come together and define a set of cost measures that help us get the project within scope and within budget, but that don't lose our quality.
So it's not
That's a lot, I
compromising
know.
quality.
So you want everything and you want it delivered.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's driving that innovation into the projects to where you're not compromising quality of the program. One other. Go ahead.
Innovative thinking.
Innovative thinking, outside the box thinking. That goes hand in hand. Right, not just scope reductions and cost cutting, but through innovative thinking, where the team's coming together and really capturing that bridge of trust and knowledge. So we're going to kind of flip through this traditional delivery stop there, Doug. You've got kind of the separate contracts, the zero-sum game. In other words, everybody's kind of in it for themselves.
Now everybody knows.
Right? Moving on through to the next point. Got this higher likelihood of certainly adversarial relationships, potentially litigation could happen. We're working in silos. And without working in silos, everybody's got their own agenda, right? I'm not going to show you my cards because you're not showing me your cards. And there isn't that transparency and there's not that communication. So as we're kind of moving out of that traditional, and that can happen with CMGC delivery, it can happen with design build delivery, it can happen with integrated project delivery. And it comes back to the human factor. People truly collaborating and taking it to the next level where there's trust, where nobody gets thrown under the bus when bad things do happen. Integrated project delivery, what we're going to talk about tonight. Multi-party agreements. In the truest form, the integrated project delivery, there are a number of different contract tools out there that are being used, and that's fairly recent, within the last 10 years, that those contracts have really evolved and been utilized. Shared risk and reward is an important part of that. So the skin in the game piece with integrated project delivery that incentivizes in terms of the monetizing of the incentive, where you're putting some of your own profit into the pot, with the opportunity to make that back plus a reward. The owner's also putting their skin in the game too, and matching that, and that's that commitment. Highly collaborative, obviously we're going to get into more detail. Key participants as equals. Everybody has a voice at the table with integrated project delivery, and that comes back to that whole developing that trust and communications. The fiscal transparency is a key piece to an IPD integrated project delivery. And integrated project delivery can be used with traditional contracts. Okay? And in the public sector, the integrated project delivery, or IPD Light, because it's not a true multi-party agreement, has all of those qualities, but it just maybe doesn't have that truly multi-party agreement where everyone's joined together truly through a multi-party agreement. So as you see these arrows, and what those arrows represent is it's getting that alignment. I call it the front-end alignment of the project. Go ahead.
Is there a sweet spot in terms of construction volume for an IPD approach?
That's a great question, and I'll just give you an example of a healthcare project that's being done through a true IPD contract by a local Northwest contractor. That agreement is less than $30 million. There was another one that was less than $10 million, and then you've got everything up to $500 million plus. So as far as the sweet spot goes, I think that I don't think that there really are any barriers to that. I think it's more about the culture and the commitment from the team and the owner. And the owner having to be a very active participant in understanding what that commitment means from the owner side.
And I wanna kind of jump in here because I've done projects from, 800 million to 2 million, $5 million projects. And I use it in all my projects, and it just depends on the level of collaboration, right? On the smaller projects, I don't require everybody in the big room 24/7. On the bigger projects, I do. So it's the amount of how much time you really need to be taking that up. It's kind of what I found. You just got to find that sweet spot in time.
Yeah, and I saw this in an interesting time in the industry. I served on the AIA Portland board from 2010 to 2012 and was a part of an AIA legislative conference. We went to DC and spoke about this a little bit. And there was a lot of interactive meetings. And at this time, the AIA was coming up with their 3 levels of kind of contract agreements for IPD because they knew they couldn't make the straight jump. And it was interesting to talk about design build, IPD Light, and then integrated project delivery was actually related to a totally different industry that kind of, I never forgot it. It was like producing a movie. And the visual was perfect. You have all these different parties, totally vested, totally shared risk reward, the key players, and they're problem solving every day. What are the elements? What are the lighting elements? What is everything that's happening with the actors? So you have to be able to react and problem solve on the spot. And I would say that's one of the most beneficial things of full project delivery, whether you have that culturally or contractually. That was the comparison that stuck with me.
Thank you, so excellent. Click that last one. At the end of the day, it's this alignment process, right? And early alignment is relates to communications, getting those goals and values, hearing what the owner's voice is early, having the contractor in the room with the architect from day one has huge benefits. But like Doug was saying, it's finding the balance too based on the project type, because there are certain projects that may not fit this. An industrial warehouse tilt-up building that's may not be the perfect fit for this, but the more complex projects that require a lot of communication and coordination definitely lend themselves to this type of delivery. Go ahead.
What is your experience with this sort of project delivery method and public work?
So our experience in the public sector has been very positive. I think the public sector in Oregon and in Washington too are slowly, I wouldn't say slowly, but they're embracing the principles, the guiding principles of the whole integrated project delivery process, the lean process that kind of goes hand in hand with that, the BIM integration piece. So I would say that the public sector, at least here regionally in Oregon and Washington, is very open to seeing how these tools can benefit their municipal projects. There are restraints that you have to work within the public sector. However, with the ORS exemption process here in Oregon and the CPAR process in Washington, they're a little bit different, but they're similar. There are ways that you can integrate these tools into those public contracts.
Follow up on that, could this be construed then as an alternative form of contracting with findings and the like, and then?
Yes, it is. Absolutely, and this is the process that we've used on 3 different large public projects here in the state of Oregon in the last 3 years. So it is part of that exemption process. It can be used with both progressive design build as well as CMGC, and it's really taking that CMGC or progressive design build to that next level of collaboration. The contract structure, though, I would say at this point, with the true multi-party agreement, that in terms of legal counsel and where public municipalities are at today, I would say that's still a stretch goal for where we're at today, but it's definitely something for the future to look at. Go ahead and let's move on through here. This is the AIA definition. I think it's the most current definition. Really, I'm not going to take a lot of time on this, but it really is about that engagement, getting everybody at the table together, the incentivizing of the risk-reward piece, and just being key participants, all bound together as equals. At the end of the day, what's the goal? Why are we doing this? It's getting that best value result at the end of the day. right? We want to get the optimal result of quality, managing that with quality, cost, risk components. And these are a number of things that we're going to talk a little bit about in more detail with the target value design. We'll talk about that, and we'll just skim the surface on target value design tonight. How many of you even know what target value design is? Or have heard the concept of target value design? So just a few of you have kind of heard about the concept of target value design. So we'll talk a little bit about that, what that is. Herb's going to talk a little bit about the whole integration with BIM and virtual design and construction and how that's working and how that's playing out. What are things going to be looking like, not just today, but 5 years from now? If you think back over the last 5 or 6 years, where we were at in the late 2008, 2010, early kind of BIM development on projects, and now we've come so far just in 5, 6 years. So I think that trajectory is going to continue. So this is kind of an interesting slide, and I use this slide to talk about levels of collaboration because it relates to your comment about we've got kind of levels 1, 2, and 3 of collaboration. The traditional CMGC or even design build, both public and private sectors, kind of that first level. You hire the contractor to help with some pre-con support. And you take it to that next level, which is where you're really using the guiding principles of IPD. And you've got that team in that engagement. And then the third level really is the contractual piece. The level 2 and level 3, though, can be very much anonymous, or not anonymous, but analogous to each other. So communications, obviously that integration and collaboration, all leading to getting that brain trust of people working together. We talked about innovation, true value engineering, right? That value engineering and that innovation happens when we've got everybody working together with the same common goals and going to that deeper level where we're really tapping into people's experience and having that respect for one another as peers in the room to really understand the value that the contractor brings to the room, the spec writer brings to the room, vendors, architects, and other consultants. Co-location and the big room concept. Just to take a quick poll, how many of you have actually been a part of a co-location? Just a couple of you, okay. So this is really kind of relates to the bigger projects, but I would say, as Doug mentioned, there are different ways to co-locate as teams. So we have a couple of projects right now, and I think there's like 4 projects in Portland that I'm aware of where this is happening right now. They're larger projects where you've got large teams and you've got that dynamic of a lot of people working together. But on smaller and mid-sized projects, there are ways to do that, kind of a version of that or a hybrid of that, where you can get that same kind of synergy, that same kind of collaboration. But it's not necessarily everyone being co-located all the time. I think technology has really helped us there to connect us through the internet, through BIM, and through a lot of the cloud-based tools that we have available to us that just a few years ago really weren't that advanced. This is kind of an IPD concept, and there's many versions of this that are out there, but really what this talks about here is you've got this kind of core group and that core cluster team of your owner architect. I'll get to your question here in a second. CMGC, owner rep, that kind of core team. And then the larger project delivery teams that are part of that larger core team or an extended core team, but not necessarily that core nucleus. These are the folks that are at the table, though, making the hard decisions about the project as it relates to quality, budget, and balancing those tension points. Go ahead.
I'm an estimator, and one of the issues that we've run into a few times now on IPD is in the big room, we're always in the big room, and we're across the table with generally a pre-con, CMGC, who's working hand in hand with designers to develop the design. But then when it comes to time and milestone estimating, we need to break from that collaborative model and produce 2 independent neutral estimates. And it's difficult to maintain the appearance of neutrality, and what mechanisms do you put in place during your milestone estimating process to keep the architect or owner's estimating team, the pre-con estimator, independent within the context of the collaborative effort?
Wow, that's a great question. I love that question. Make sure we got that one written down. That's a great.
Yeah.
That's one of those real life
Excellent
questions.
question. So, really thoughtful question. Did everybody hear that? So, how do you maintain the purity of this kind of third-party estimating peer review process when you've got your pre-con team, third-party estimator in this IPD environment? So, that's a really good kind of core team discussion that happens at that core team level of how much transparency during that period. So there are these milestone updates that happen. So within a target value design process, which is really about real-time cost estimating that's iterative, it's continuous, where you've got the back and forth across the table between your designer, your contractor, your estimator. You have component teams that break that down into bite-sized pieces, and so you're managing those components within the overall budget. So we're going through this process on another project here in town right now. And part of that process for us was, it was important for us to come together with everybody in the room and have that kickoff meeting where we went through with the architect, the contractor, our third-party estimator, all in the room together. We went through, kind of, not a true page turn, but what are the assumptions, what are the component teams, and making sure that those assumptions were on the same page, right? So when you do break and you do have these kind of separate independent reviews for these milestone updates, I think it's important to have that first kind of kickoff meeting and then allow for kind of the estimator folks to go and do their stuff on both sides, the contractor side and the third-party estimator side. But then what we encourage and what we're doing is encouraging that open dialogue between the estimators. So that as we're going through the process, let's say we have an early update to part of the overall budget, which is a component, and we'll talk about that in a little more detail here, and get that communication going, or continue that communication, so that when we actually come back together, let's say in 3 weeks, a big project, you need about 3 weeks to go through a detailed estimating process. When you come back together, if it's the first time that you've communicated in 3 weeks, there's going to be a lot of back and forth and normalization to get the assumptions, the quantities, and all of those things on the same page. So I encourage open communication and dialogue between the estimating groups and the architects, because the process of design doesn't stop, right? So in an integrated delivery process, we don't tell the architects and spec writers to put their pencils down and stop. We just keep going. And so the design is evolving, right? It's this cycle, right? It's iterative. It's going in a direction, but it's doing this. And it's spinning continuously. So there's a lot of information that's happening even in that 3-week period, but you do have to have a kind of a baseline that you have to work with. So one thing that we do is we have the baseline of, okay, this is the benchmark that we're working with. But as new information does come to the surface, we track that new information as adjustments to the budget, so that we're able to have that point in time, but also look at what are the things that happen in that 3-week period, so that when we get to a normalized estimate, we're not 3 weeks behind. I don't know if that helps or not, because I could talk for an hour on that. Let's keep going here, because I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Really, this is driving home graphically. Let's get everybody on board early. Okay, we can do this in the public sector. We're doing it. It does require that exemption process that's available to us. You have to be able to demonstrate the need for it in the public sector. In the private sector, we've been doing it ever since I was, in the private sector, in the development world. We've been doing it for a long time. We just didn't call it IPD. We called it teaming and other things, but it's been around for a long time. It's fairly new to the public sector, but I think what the public sector is seeing the value. So driving forces, waste and lack of productivity, technology, the under demand for value, true value, getting that budget design alignment, the target value design piece, getting that early, establishing that target budget early in pre-design, not at schematic design or design development, where we have new terminology now in the IPD world for that. Get your baseline established in the pre-design, and you can make assumptions based on program information, and with good estimators in parametric cost modeling, which is using historical data, you can actually get a pretty good budget, even without any information on paper. Sustainability is a really important piece. Operations and maintenance, we're going to hit on that more. The lean design process and how that wraps into BIM, fast tracking the projects, and that transition and handoff to the O&M piece. With the technology that we have now with BIM and the BIM integration process, that handoff to the owner is a much more robust tool that we need to work very hard with our owners on, particularly on the facility side, that need to understand, oh, these tools are going to help me, and to kind of get into this new paradigm of thinking away from the volumes of paper manuals and O&M documents to having it at the tablet. And that's what we really want to do. It's not just joint project metrics, right? So project charter early in the project is something that we really encourage, getting everybody together. It's that alignment of all of these criteria so that you're calibrating the project and that you have those goals and objectives established early before the project. This is the slide really that relates back to the culture engineering and target value design and that kind of traditional model where we design, we value engineer, or we cut, and then we design some more, we're over budget. And so, I know there's somewhere. And really the concept with target value design, and we don't have time to go into great detail, is you're flipping the process upside down and you're creating early on detailed budgets with a contractor or an estimator that has good knowledge and experience that can help establish what those component costs are within an overall budget and then you're managing to that. So Doug, why don't you talk a little bit about the component teams. Component teams basically are breaking down that budget. Let's say it's a $50 million budget, breaking it down into the different systems, right? And getting and empowering the teams of experts in the room to work hand in hand together, both on the contracting side and the architect and engineer side, to work through those budgets in great detail. And having that accountability, I would say, is a very important piece too. We call it, in the lean world, we call it reliable promises. But it's getting the right experts in the room, working through the details, and hashing it out.
Yeah, so as Mike said, these are basically some of the higher level areas that you'd look at for target value design, right? You look at your site, which is a big number that you're going to pull in, you're going through it, you're going to want to get the right people in the room, you're going to want to make sure you have your contractor, your architect, your designer, everybody designing and estimating all, and the contractor all in there so that while you're doing that design process, you're not designing something that isn't in the owner's interest, isn't going to work, is going to be too it's going to be expensive, and you're going to have to value engineer it. So it's eliminating that value engineering phase where you're making those hard cuts. It's like, okay, look, we're starting to swing a little bit too far, let's go back. Oh wait, we went too far the other direction, let's swing back. So we try to keep to that steady line, right? It's kind of like a sine wave. We start out with some pretty big swings, and pretty soon we start to modulate down to a nice, steady process. That's kind of what we have here. We're going to look at the site, we're going to look at your structure, your enclosures, interior, FF&E, get down to there. Hopefully by then you've kind of got your budget figured out, you know where you're at. But you still want to look at that, and then your MEPIT, because these are basically the key areas where you can really get your budget out of whack. And so that's kind of the idea behind target value design on the teams.
I'll just add one more thing here. So one question might be, when is the appropriate time to actually kind of set up this process and project? How early do you do it? And every project has kind of different rhythm and different cadence, but we encourage this process to start in the early schematic design phase, or the criteria design phase of the project. So That way, as you're working through the details, because schematic design is really when you're going from a program with blocking and stacking and kind of massing of the building and what's on the inside, and you're looking at big pieces, right, of what are all the different departmental pieces within the building. You're working from big into your beginning, you're working with the detail. Getting these component teams started early is a really important thing. Now, you may not be meeting weekly early on, but as the project grows legs and the detail starts to come together, we encourage that kind of cadence, particularly in larger projects, where there's that weekly component team meeting. And then the key here too is that, remember the silo graphic? We've got the silos and that cross-pollination of communication. The key is not just with these component teams working by themselves, but it's those component teams checking in with the other groups, particularly when it comes to mechanical, electrical, technology. Think about structure and envelope, how those have to be so integrated, along with the architecture and the interior design. So that component team process, while you've got the experts that are focused on their components, you've got to have a way to bring them together so that there's those report outs and that cross communication between the different teams. We're going to shift now to Herb and talk about this. This is like the most amazing graphic. I love this thing. But Herb, why don't you, we're going to kind of pass the baton to you for a few minutes to hit on building information modeling, where we're at today, and I think where we're going in the future.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, good teamers. How many bring you guys at the game on Sunday? It's a great game. Great game. So I get to start with the question, what is building information modeling for BIM? And I know that for myself and our team, it's a very exciting area. And we find that the more we learn about BIM, there's so much more to learn. And some of it's accelerated by the technology, harder computing. But we view BIM as a process. And a process that supporting the life cycle of the building, its Brent's life cycle. And I'm going to go back to what Mike referred to as well in terms of lean principles. And if you define BIM as a process in short, and I'm not going to get into too much detail, but it's a process is simply a sequence of steps that produces a product or service. So this could be a model, it could be a set of drawings, it could be a building, big picture. Lean, whether it be new manufacturing or construction, the goal of Lean is to eliminate waste, to eliminate non-value-added steps in that process. So when you couple these two ideas, we view BIM as a vehicle to deliver Lean principles. And as the BIM movement evolves, there's, in an exciting way, not only emphasis on the knowledge of the information of BIM, with a deliverable understand having delivered first time models and information that can be used as a database that is accurate and accessible. And so it's a concept of first time quality. VDC. This is a sub-process within BIM, categorizing as such. Virtual design and construction. This, similarly, it's not software, but it's really a set of tools and processes where it requires, as a part of a component of BIM, really involving many of the things that Mike was developing in terms of the principles of IPD. And in this thing, the model can be used as a shared resource. Have people seen this graph before? It's a lot of times at AIA, gatherings and presentations. I won't spend too much time because it simply reaffirms a true north path is integrated product delivery or enhanced design build. And I share this because this has been used over time in the auto industry, in shipbuilding, aerospace, and now as a strategy in the design and construction of buildings. And what this says simply is that, in principle, as a strategy, the more you upswing or upload your resources in a collaborative environment, ideally will impact the cost favorably and the functionality of your product or your building. CDC, so this is an example.
Movie time.
Hope you don't get busy. But again, VDC is the process.
All over the
Yeah. processor tools, and bottom line, you build it before you build it in a collaborative environment. And who's a modeler here? CAD guy? Good. Architect? We're in the software. I think you'll agree, there's so many different authoring tools right now. This just touches on a federated model creation tool called Navisworks. I'm sure you've heard of that. And that's just an example of a tool that we call the big 3D bucket. You can put any 3D model format in there and overlays it so it can be flash detection. That's what it has come to learn. And authoring software, we spend a whole day talking about different tools to accelerate the integration of them in an IPD or delivery or environment. Being a part of the CSI forum, this is what we call the LOD onion. AIA BIM forums have done a great job of creating standards in terms of level. There's a tutorial that shows going from LOD 100, 3 to 400 for construction and fabrication. And with these standards, thanks. Again, there's been a great effort to define handout points in terms of level of development as a project goes through the course of design work, whether it be a 100, 200, 400, and ultimately a 500 facilities purposes.
So, how many of you are lost when you look at this? Does everyone understand what this is? Because it's fairly kind of new to the industry. I know sitting in the room with contractors and subcontractors, this is a big discussion as it relates to the BIM process and really about the handoff points between the design team, the engineers, the contractor, and liability and risk. Who takes on that liability and what are those appropriate handoff points? This is an area that I think in the next 5 years we're going to see a lot of changes with the AIA and the AGC and that collaboration, and a lot of really good changes in terms of that integrated process between designer and contractor and trade partners working together with the idea that we're only drawing at once. And so when you think about what we can do now with, trying not to throw my water out, with designing at one time, so there's no shop drawings. Imagine that. There's no shop drawings or submittals to review for the HVAC and the piping distribution systems because it's all in the model. So that's really where we're going when you think about these levels of development from a design standpoint. And the handoff point right now is in the kind of the 400 level, I guess. 3 to 400 levels. Yeah. And so with this progressive delivery, and particularly with progressive design builds and integrated project delivery, I think what we're going to see is more contractor trade partners that are going to be taking on maybe more responsibility. And the traditional engineering, mechanical, electrical engineers forming stronger kind of strategic partnerships with the trade partners on projects where those handoff points are going to happen seamlessly and a little bit earlier.
Go to the next one. Yeah, we'll show the video. Yeah. We're going to switch gears a bit. Still talking about DEC.
Is it playing on my?
Oh, it is.
Popcorn. I'm talking next, so. There we go.
My screens are just backwards.
Well, there we go. Yeah, this is an example of technology augmentation. I think many of you have heard of laser scanning, LiDAR, using your project. Compared to 5 years ago, this is becoming fairly common in terms of, I think, addressing some of the questions like not have to make assumptions on existing conditions. But with laser scanning technology, can, as many of us know, capture very pristine as-built conditions. This is an example in a unique project that one can argue in terms of an industrial application, where the owner approved a fairly sizable chunk of budget to create an as-built scan so that it can be used to create very accurate drawings off the get-go. And the reason for this is in this particular plant environment, there is a very limited window to do equipment upgrades and the owner didn't want to lose production. And so they made the decision to do this. In terms of accuracy, generally speaking, plus or minus a quarter of an inch. This one, very specific, and I had someone from Siemens is on the electrical side, but we were doing a motor swap out, and it required us to get motor shaft center lines to within about plus or minus 2 or 3 millimeters. And so that's the level of accuracy that you achieve. Now, it's not microwave popcorn. the acronym SCAN to 3D, it's still, I think, a workflow that's developing for many of you that have used SCAN, because it is very tedious, but there are automated software that is helping the interpretation or the auto generation of, say, windows, walls, and such. That kind of takes us to our last slide here. Where it's been going, I can speak maybe from a modeling and an operating perspective. The last one there is an example I mentioned in terms of up-and-coming extraction software that assists the use of cloud point data. We had a discussion in reference to level of development. The level of development, on the one hand, is strictly about content. And compared to, say, 5 years ago, there are a lot more values and objects that are really available for multiple operating software platforms. Revit, one of them, is a popular one that we all know of. And finally, in terms of, I'll call it model quality control, quality assurance, Navisworks, as many of us know, can be used as a visualization and class detection tool. You could argue that it's a QA/QC tool to validate the quality of the model. An example of a next generation type of software is there are now applications, and we're in beta on one of them, is to use rule-based software checking so that you can fairly, in an automated way, check attributes of the model. For example, if you have air handling units in the model, you can check to see that all the titles are in accordance with specifications and named according to the spec. Or you can do a check to see if your doors meet the fire standards, fire code standards. Automatically, you do mass edits. Again, it's all about refining the accuracy of the model. So with that said, appreciate the time that I do it that way.
All right. Actually, I'm gonna take over from here, Herb. So as Mike said, I'm kind of the technology guru, I guess, of the company. So I like tech. It's kind of my thing. So anyways, we're going to talk about technology platforms and other stuff besides BIM. So we're looking at Bluebeam, Smartsheet, SharePoint, and those basic tech features. How many of you guys have used Bluebeam? I think everybody's pretty much been using it. I just recently got off of a very large project where in the beginning of it they told me we were going to go paperless, and I laughed because, you know, I kind of came up like Mike through the trades. I was a carpenter, later went back on my engineering degree and then started doing project management, and I was like, there's no way you're going to do a paperless project. It's just not going to happen. Bluebeam made me a believer, so it's definitely changed that. So that being said, let's dive in the slides. So back in the beginning, you know, we had our ledgers, and we wrote on these wonderful ledgers, and we had to have really good penmanship, and we had to make sure everything was correct. And let's face it, it didn't lead to very much collaboration because nobody wanted somebody to walk into the room and say, hey, can you just tweak this a little bit? It's like, do you realize how much changing I have to do? I have to rewrite all this, wipe that out? No, why I'm not doing that, you know? So there's definitely a lot of silos that were built, and a lot of it was built because I believe because on the technology that we had. We didn't lend to good collaboration and the ability to actually get in there and work together, because it was like, I don't want to rewrite that, and it took too long to do it in the first place. So by the time the design was done, it was set in stone. We did an estimate on it, we moved forward, we built the thing. You know, that was just what we were going to do. You know, that being said, now we've got, you know, Bluebeam, so we've got this wonderful tool. You know, we can stream it out into the cloud. send it out to the field. The guys, this is a picture of a little kiosk here that you can put out on your job site, and the guys can get on there. They can actually see the plans real time. So as the architect's making changes in Bluebeam, in the studio, or on a SharePoint, it's getting updated to the guys out in the field. So now instead of saying, I didn't get that RFI, or I didn't see that change, that ASI, or whatever that came through, it's like, yeah, you did, and it came out 5 minutes ago, and it's on your screen, you know? So, and what I found was really refreshing for me, and one of the things that I used to have to do a lot as a project manager, was I had to walk around and problem solve, like, how come there's a beam running through the middle of my elevator shaft, you know, and it's a structural beam, and now I gotta figure out how to shift the elevator shaft or do something with this beam, right, that's structural and supports my entire building. And so it's a major problem, right? So you don't have that because you have the clash detection, and now this works, you have Bluebeam, so the guys out in the field are looking at this up front early and they're saying, whoa, wait a minute, if I put this here, that's gonna go through your elevator, that's gonna be a problem. So you can talk about, you have that collaboration, which I think is really the key to everything we've been talking about today, right? Is getting out of your silo, talking to the other group, making sure that everybody's communicating and getting the right information out to the field. And that's really what SharePoint, Smartsheet, if you guys haven't used it, great tool. It's basically Excel on steroids. So that being said, let's move forward. So BIM, I think we kind of talked about that. I'm not going to read through the slide. But this is a project I think most of you know that I worked on down on the South Waterfront. It's a very iconic building right now. We have the park and the spaceship in the center, you know, Noah's Ark. I think you guys have all seen it. It's right off I-5. And then just getting into VDC during construction. So, and this kind of is what I was talking about, the clashing, and basically one of the things we were able to do on that project that I just showed you on the South Waterfront was the mechanical guy was able to go back into his shop, build out the entire piping structure, come in pieces like plug and play Legos, right? Crane the whole thing up, set it, crane the next one up, set it, and hook them up. That was it. So everything was prefab in the shop. It came on a pallet, the whole system came up, and we set it. We had blue bangers that we put in the ceiling, which I don't know if you guys have used blue bangers or not before. There's definitely some controversy about whether we can use them in Oregon or not. But you basically, they're little all thread. They receive all thread into them. You pound them into the slab, into your wood deck before your slab. So everything's done on top of the deck. Instead of a guy driving around in a little scissor lift or something, shooting up overhead, trying to get the exact point, you place all these on the ground. So you walk around and shoot them in with GPS. You got them all placed. Now when you go to hang all of your overhead stuff, you just screw in a piece of all thread into the blue banger that's in there. So great tool, great things, you know, moving forward with technology. That being said, I'm gonna go ahead.
Before we're going to pass this over to the operations and maintenance, but I do want to pause for a second here. We've covered a lot of information, but just those kind of case study examples of true value engineering, where you innovate using BIM, using the technology tools, Blue Banger example, by being able to get that all located in the model and fast tracking that project, we estimated a couple $1 million of savings in doing that, so they didn't have any field rotor hammers to do. On top of that, the whole prefabrication process with a large lab building and the, basically building everything in a shop environment on skids was a several $1 million savings to the project, not just in terms of construction dollars with some contractor savings, but schedule savings and compression. So these are the innovations that for owners really do bring the true value to the table. And when you have that integrated process and everybody's working together early, and you have budget problems, which every project has. I have haven't been on one where we haven't had that program design budget tension. It always happens. But when you get everybody in the room and that brain trust working together, you start to look at these things. The contractor's going to say, you know, I've got to let go of some of my contingency that I had to deal with this on-site stuff because we found a better way to build the mousetrap. And it really is all about driving innovation, lean, removing waste from projects, doing it right the first time. As it relates to doing it right for the first time and we turn it over to the owner at the end of the day, let's shift gears here and Glenn, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure.
What you're currently doing and just that integration with commissioning.
Right, so during the course of the project, of course, you get to the point where the major pieces of the MEP equipment are being installed into the building or on the roof. And as the project progresses, you get to that point where it's time to start up that equipment and getting it energized and ready to be put into service. And about that time, traditionally, general contractor will start thinking about bringing on board the owner's commissioning authority and turn them loose on the project. But what I've been finding out lately through a number of different projects is it makes a whole lot more sense. It makes the project go a whole lot smoother if that commissioning engineer is brought on board much in advance of that startup process, so that it allows the MEP subs, the tab guys, the control subcontractors all to get together and start looking at that schedule to make sure that the sequence of events and tasks are all dialed in correctly, so that the parade of trades and the work with the commissioning authority can all happen in a logical, smooth sequence. I've seen too many episodes, and I'm sure you guys have too, where the mechanical, electrical, plumbing equipment all starts going in, and the owner brings on board his or her commissioning authority, and nothing's working right. You've got the tab guy going off and doing his thing, and trying to adjust the air pressures and water pressures, whatnot of the equipment, and the commissioning engineers trying to balance everything, and nothing's working right. Well, if you bring them on board a lot sooner, and again, have that collaboration and looking at the schedule, tweaking the schedule a bit to make sure that the order of sequencing is appropriate and correct for all the individuals involved, you know, much smoother and quicker turnaround for that equipment starting up. And what I also found out is that the commissioning process provides an added value for the owner, and that is the time for his crews, his maintenance crews, the men and women who are going to be charged with operating that facility long after the design team and construction team have left the site, gives them the added value of shadowing the commissioning engineers so that they get a feel for the way that the equipment is supposed to be operated and the way it's supposed to sound and bump and grind and moan and groan. It just gives them a much better sense of the interplay between the balancing and bringing together all that equipment into a functioning building that will work right and continue working on through the years. At the end of the project, of course, we've got the deliverables that are really key for the owner and the owner's crews. The tab report, the sequence of operations for controls, as-built drawings, especially staff training, owner training, and final commissioning reports. And then I'd also like to piggyback on everything that Herb's been talking about the BIM. That is a fabulous tool for the owner going forward for the next 20, 30, 50 years of his building. And providing the owner with the tools to understand and use that BIM software, that whole BIM program as a tool in their tool belt for any kind of changes that are going to happen, years from now when the team's gone. It's just a really good asset. Well, in this slide, we're talking about the end result. Doug was talking about the dark ages. This is the dark ages back here. Yeah, it's paper. It's tons and tons of paper, 3-ring binders rolled up. How many times you turn over to the owner, or the owner receives like a closet full of this stuff? You go, God, what am I going to do with all this stuff? If the owner happens to be head or a school district or something, you got 3 or 4 schools going on all at the same time, they all closing about the same time, like about 10 minutes before school starts. You got a truckload of paper. Well, the technology is moving such that the owner's going to get pretty much just a hard drive with a couple terabytes of equipment. Whether it's the dark age paper or the contemporary electronic tools, that information's got to be processed and delineated in a very thoughtful and accurate and easily accessible way. Otherwise, the guys using it 5 years from now be like deers in the headlights. All this information is just jumbled up and they'll be able to find it. So for the architects, the engineers, the contractors here tonight, think about the poor person who's got to deal with your project 5 years after you've left. Provide them with the tools that they can use that are easily accessible, easy to understand, easy to get to. Those are the lasting relationships, the lasting memories they're going to have with your firm, and you want it to be a positive experience.
So that I want to partner onto that. So one of the things that Glenn, he's been talking about, which is going to this wonderful little drive over here, which is about what 100. Let's say it's $120 tops, right? All that paper probably costs close to $1 million. I know we saved upwards of $1 million on that other project that I was working on by not having the paper. When we looked at all the times that you have to, go in and reproduce another set of drawings, do an updated set, consolidated set, and everything else, time, money. Now it's all going on a drive. You hand it over to the owner at the end of the day. It's all hyperlinked together. He can hand it over to his maintenance guys. They take a tablet like this out into the field. They go, oh yeah, let me see, what's that? Oh, okay, and that's this light bulb, and we go down to the spec, and here it is, and this is what it was supposed to be, and I've got everything, right? I go buy the bulb. I'm done. Instead of, where's all that paper at? I gotta go find it. That it gets burned or thrown away. So anyways, moving on, we'll move forward as I digress. Thank you, Lynn.
Oh, tell you what, we're going to take this one.
Okay, go ahead.
So, at the end of the day, it's all about making sure that we're sort of seeing plan, right? And that's a good segue into talking about sustainability. And I know that we're running a little bit long here on time, so I want to turn this sustainability piece, which is a very important piece for owners. It relates to operations and maintenance and what that means for owners as far as driving the value of the projects.
Thanks, Mike. Definitely don't think they say the best for last, and they say the most passionate. So this is a little dangerous. Feel free to grab your last libation, whatever you want to have to keep going. But I just want to end it on a note of where this is coming from for me. I did grow up in Portland on a houseboat on the Willamette River. And it's corrugated aluminum. It has silos as domes. My dad designed it. And I grew up swimming to Ross Island. So I saw all of that. Wanted to jump in the river and see CSO signs going, what's happening? What's wrong with our built environment affecting us? So I've definitely had that engraved with me from the beginning. So this is something that is near and dear to my heart, but coming from an architecture firm that went under in 2008, large firm, we were working in Dubai, China, I was working in their Seattle office, large scale projects, we didn't think budget was even an issue from our perspective. I saw the curse of the value engineering that I was passionate about when I started our sustainability team, which ended up being the progressive team. We were the ones that were looking holistically. We were the ones that were talking about integration early on. And because it wasn't ingrained in the culture, it was something that when value engineering came, all of our ideas that could have moved the project to a new level, find synergies, cost-saving opportunities, envelope, mechanical systems, were never really found. We couldn't communicate that. So my passion in starting EcoReal in 2009 has really been those communication tools. How do you get these teams to talk early on? And we start with the Eco Shred. So this is something that's funded by Energy Trust. Speaking of always finding money and fueling things that way. So we get all the stakeholders involved as early as possible. So owners, contractors, engineers, architects, contractors subcontractors as much as we can, facility managers as much as we can. And we try to give them a voice. So we do interactive exercises, we try to get them involved so we can learn from each other. Because it's not about finger pointing anymore. That's what I saw, redlining, finger pointing, who's wrong. That was always a conquest, to prove who was the most wrong and it wasn't you. Now it's
I'm
about,
sorry, but you're wrong.
yeah, exactly. Thank you, Mike, you can jump in. So, you know, how can we work together? And it's a free-for-all. You're early enough in the design process where nothing's wrong to bring up. And that's kind of key. You know, nothing's locked in. You're talking about things in pre-design. Something that we're doing a few Path to Net Zero programs with Energy Trust. And Portland, the county, the city as a whole has kind of embraced this Architecture 2030 challenge. There's a 70% reduction in our energy use. And so this is very ambitious. This is kind of a blanket, and this has triggered a lot of emphasis on funding for energy modeling, collaboration, energy modelers talking to contractors about cost effectiveness of our ideas. So it doesn't stop in pre-design. It's something that carries on in an iterative design process. So we're really talking about sustainability as a systemic process. These systems are all interrelated, like a body. Lose a limb and not notice it. These things are all interrelated. We want to take a holistic approach. Living buildings we've heard about. I worked on the Junkie Delta House. There were some things we could learn about something, making something more practical. So really we're seeing now is a hybrid approach. We're really looking as LEED still as a fundamental base practice. That's something that's still very mandatory in federal projects, PDC. It's something that's still coming through. So it used to LEED version 4. It's emerging, it's mandatory in October. But it leads into well-building, Path to Net Zero. They all interact with each other. So don't think, which one are we doing? Just start to think about sustainability and all of these systems and how they interrelate. From sites to materials to water efficiency, energy, and indoor environmental quality. Not just efficiency, but the quality of our lighting. What's the color rendering that affects our productivity? That's a big business case for businesses like Nike and the large corporations these days. So green building integrated management. Herb is actually one of my mentors, I didn't even know it, one of my first LEED Green workshops in 2009 probably when I started. And he started talking about this lean process that you guys heard about. Like, we need to lean this out. We need to make green sustainability not a cost premium. We need to integrate it throughout every stage so it's seamless. It's not something that's in a bucket, that's a big headache at the end, there's a cost premium. It's something we need to cut out as we go. So my first project was working hands-on with the contractors and subcontractors at a federal job site in deep Northeast Washington. Flying to Spokane, driving 2 hours north, land port entry project. So I went from architecture straight to that perspective. Best thing could have happened to me. It's all about bridging the gap between what's happened to specifications, that may mention how important it is, but also learning from the subcontractors' boots on the ground. So how can we build communication tools? We called it Green Building Integrated Management, GBIM, I give that to her, because trying to integrate with this natural thing that was happening, but anybody can do it. It's really about integrating these things early on in your discussion and making sure it's a dialogue, and use these virtual tools, communication, the models, to keep a record. So it's not something you have to dig up in an email that nobody can find or a notebook. Make it a part of your process. It ends up streamlining the tracking and verification process, saving money in the end. You want to assess everything in pre-design, but build tools that you're going to carry on throughout. Triple bottom line is a buzzword. This is something you can use as part of your value-added process throughout, not just value engineering, but how does it affect the economic, environmental, and social implications. So we're talking about owners, architects, contractors, subcontractors, all having their tools in hand so they can be educated and give them a voice. Everybody needs to be a part of this discussion. And I think that's where, hear a little my passion coming out. I've seen the other side. This is where true sustainability, success in a project, successful project delivery without integration even being added as a buzzword in front really happens if we all work together.
Awesome. So So it's kind of a wrap up here. What have we learned over our experiences? Maybe this just kind of gives you a little bit of a taste for what we've learned and this learning process that we're all in together. So I guess as my kind of close wrap up for today, what we're going to hang around and do today is as a thought partner in this process of where we're going in our industry, don't just think about the silo that you work in. Just think about your little narrow spectrum of, this is all I'm doing, so why does all this other stuff matter? Well, it really does matter. So look at the whole process from start to finish, and the human factor of how we all come together. It really, to pull off projects, large projects, small projects, some small projects take the same amount of resources as large projects. They really do. And particularly when you're working in occupied environments. So think about the whole team, because it takes a village to do projects successfully. It's not done by an individual, it's not done by a superstar, it's done by this collective conscious. So that's really my charge to each of you tonight, is to think about how can I impact my industry in a positive way and make it better. And if we're all doing that together and making it better, 5 years from now, we'll be coming back together and having a beer or a microbrew and talking about some of those success stories. Now, what is it that I can do different about myself to make me better as a communicator and to be more of a collaborator? Is my style and personality abrasive in my communications? Maybe it is. Maybe I need to look inside and reflect. And when you have an environment where nobody gets thrown in the bus, and we're all working together with the same common goals, and you can respectfully kind of have that critical thought with each other, it's going to make the industry better. So thank you very much. We really appreciate your time, and I'll just open it up. I don't know if I think we've gone over, but hopefully this has been helpful for you. And I'll open it up for questions, and we're here as long as you need us to. Go ahead.
All right, so I totally buy into this entire concept. I think it's the way to move forward to build more collaborative projects. But I'm struggling on how it happens, the degree of competitive bidding. I think that's a big barrier from the customer side. And also, how do you get people, you got to start at the very beginning. So how do you make sure you have the right partners at the beginning to move forward with this entire process?
So it's multiple questions there.
And loaded.
So it's a definite paradigm shift, right? It's a total paradigm shift from how the design, bid, build environment works. And what, frankly, most institutional owners, and I've worked with many, and I've been on the owner's side as the owner myself, are used to that kind of traditional environment. So there's a paradigm shift there in terms of how we think. So it's starting the conversation early. There's education, I think, that is a part of that with, not with just the architect and the contractor community, but also with our owners. And educating our owners of why is this valuable? We're not just doing this because it's a fad and because it's the cool thing, but it's really looking at what are the tangible benefits that you as an owner are going to get at the end of the day. Because if there's really not a benefit that the owner is going to receive, then we probably shouldn't do it. We should probably do something different that's going to serve our client's interests. So at the end of the day, it really is about how do we serve the owner. I don't know, are you a contractor, or an architect, or a subcontractor?
I'm a subcontractor.
So you're a subcontractor. Perfect. That's what I thought.
And I think it does serve the owner's best interests in the end. But there's also, how do you bridge that gap in communicating to them how it'll serve? I'm not communicating that properly.
So I can kind of, I think I'll take this question.
Okay.
So What I've found is when you come on board with the owner and you talk to them and you explain to them about collaboration and you kind of, get them into the idea of having that open communication collaboration process. You also talk about bring on your best subs up front first as soon as you get your contractor on board. You still maintain the same bid process, still go through everything just like you normally would, except for you're looking for people that not only hit the right price, but are going to work with the team. So when you're looking for that, right, and you're picking those people out, you're saying, okay, this guy's got the lowest price, but the team that they're throwing out there doesn't look like it's going to fit with our team. So they might not make it, right? Because we're looking for the best value. We're not looking for the best price. And that's part of it, right? How does that team integrate with us? So you get the architect on board, make sure the architect works with the owner, everything's good, get the contractor on board, make sure that works, right? You're building that team environment. Now I'm kind of going outside of the IPD, right, when you build that model and you bring them all together, but you can still do that, and that's where you get that collaboration and that going together that works. And that works at all levels. Go ahead.
We work a lot with subcontractors, and on a green spec note, we've heard some of the hurdles with this, especially with sustainability and these green building standards like LEED version 4 evolving the specs that we're writing before we're seeing them in full implementation yet. So you're saying follow the specs. And I'm looking in this region here, and that was a really great comment. But what we're hearing from subcontractors on low bid situations for public projects, where they have these overarching sustainability goals and some integration project delivery being discussed, there's sometimes some tension, and you have to be careful about translating the sustainability goals through every CSI division. When with sustainability, we're usually looking at aggregate totals of everything that's going into the building. So to have it for door hardware on a school, that they have to have a healthy product initiative associated with it, or declaration associated with it, is maybe not necessary. So we're learning right now, and I think it's important that, makes it even more important that we have the subcontractors involved in the conversation, and that we actually get that feedback, because that's happening right now. We're feeling that tension. And I think you're bringing up a really important point, because integrated project delivery and sustainability goal talk a lot about performance-based. And so we need to make sure that we have a little leniency with that when it really applies.
What I see as a subcontractor a lot of times is you read the specifications, you look at the drawings, you might have a good concept of the design intent, but per the drawings and per the contract, it's dictating something different. And there are a lot of different cracks and holes and things that can be filled, and through the integrative process, and if you have that open dialogue, I think you have an opportunity to say, look,
yeah,
you're saying this, but you really mean this, and we can save you opportunity, we can save you money, we can save you time, we can do all these different things, but now I'm placed in a competitive bid situation, so I have to go by what the bid is, and I need to cut it bare bones and go verbatim of what it is, this is what my bid is going to be, because the guy bidding next to me is going to do the same thing.
Right.
So how do
you
you
open dialogue, because you're all thinking the same thing if you're.
How do you get from one paradigm to the other, still being competitive and communicating openly and being part of that team?
So that's I'm going to answer that, and then I want to open it up for other questions. Okay. Really good question. We don't have all the answers here tonight, but it's a good question to kind of continue that dialogue with the contracting community and the architectural community. With an IPD process, we talked about target value design, a little bit about component teams. The trade partners are actually part of that. So how that works, whether it's public sector or private sector, and it really goes back to the core team, and it's the onboarding process of when you bring in those key trade partners, subcontractors in your case. So when I say trade partners, I'm talking about subcontractors, mechanical, electrical, structural, envelope, security, technology. There are a lot of subcontractors that we can bring on early that bring that expertise and knowledge that as the paradigm's shifting into this more integrated approach, and you really hit it on the head early, is getting everybody at the table early, right? So it's figuring out the sausage making process with the architects and the contractor and the owner. When does it make best sense to get the subcontractor involved in the project and to still have a competitive process, which you can do through a best value selection that's both qualifications and price based. So the smart contractors that, maybe that's not the right word, progressive contractors that we're working with, what we're seeing with progressive contractors that are really embracing these tools, okay, is recognizing what are the timings for bringing those key subs on board. All the way down to drywall and metal studs. And frankly, it's having those conversations early at the table, the architect, the owner, and the contractor making those decisions as a team. And again, even though that you're not part of that core team as a trade partner, there's the inner circle and then there's that outer circle, which is just as important because you're an extension of that core team. So the more that we're utilizing that brain trust, that knowledge that you bring and that experience you bring, that's the driving value of the project. So there's still a competitive piece because we all have to be accountable in terms of providing good value and what that means in terms of cost to the owner. But we're also in the business to make money, right? We're all in the business to make a fair profit. At the end of the day, that fair profit does translate into this integrated process. Is that Cortana speaking? Siri has a question. So other questions, you can talk offline too. If you want to give me your card, we can talk some more. But
so, how far along the way do you think we are now? Like, what percentage of the projects, particularly in this region, would you say are using this kind of integrated approach, and how do you see it progressing?
I think there's, gosh, I don't really have a true assessment of that, but I'll bet we're probably maybe 40%. If you take all of the projects and maybe not necessarily contractual structure of an IPD agreement, which is a multi-party agreement, that's maybe 2%. So true multi-party agreement, there are two that have been done in Oregon. Justin?
I can think of two, yeah. I can think of the same two you're thinking of.
Two in Oregon, maybe 3 in Washington that have used the true form of agreement. So if you kind of peel back the layers, it's the guiding principles. It's the collaboration, that integration. It's the contracting piece. Quite frankly, the contracting piece shouldn't matter, right? It's the values. It really shouldn't. So once you get that contract done, if you have a truly integrated team, you never pull the contract out of the except maybe for referencing to some specific items that have to do with some sort of deliverables,
take the contract with you to every meeting.
But when it comes to truly integrated, successful project at the end of the day where everybody's happy and smiling, so the contract never comes out, right? And that's really the goal of this process, is that you truly have that high level of collaboration and trust and accountability, and everybody has the same goals, and we're all in it together. We want to win for the right reasons. Any other questions?
Thank you.
So far, have you seen thoughts with the traditional design project
When traditional design did build,
Yeah.
yeah, I think there's evolving data that would support the value of in terms of just basically the cost piece and driving value to the project in terms of the bottom line from an economic standpoint. But there's also the bigger picture of what defines value, right? And so is it just the first cost in the project, or is it looking at the 30-year, 50-year life cycle? So when you think about a capital project, hospitals, for example, if you look at the 30-year life cycle cost of a hospital, about 8% of that 30-year life cycle is the capital construction. 8%. So on schools, it's a little bit higher. I don't know, Randy, if you know the metric between first cost and life cycle costs
I don't.
with schools, but it's more in the 15%
15 to
range.
20, I'd say.
So you think about the little box of making those early decisions and making the right decisions and how that affects the bigger picture.
I'm going to revise that because we make our schools last for 50 years. It's probably like switch.
So those are some of the really important value pieces. It's not just the first cost, which I believe is there's supporting data that you can look at that will support both progressive design build and integrated project delivery as being a better value. Particularly when you think about how many projects that are designed to go to litigation and what that actual final cost is. And the quality, compromising, and some of these things that you'll get.
Start to burn it was right in front.
Thanks, everybody.
Sure.
All right, well, thank
What's
you.
up?